In today's video, we're going to be giving you a review of Gaahlerie's new advanced GHAD-39 Airbrush. My name's James and welcome to the Distant Vale. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had quite a few different projects ranging from busts to our Star Wars Legion diorama piece, all of which have had to use an airbrush, and we've been lucky enough to be putting that GHAD-39 airbrush through its paces. The Gaahleri Advanced GHAD-39 comes in quite a sleek box packaging with a little cardboard box inside it. Now, this retails at around $45 on average. It's currently on offer for $39. What I quite like is there's a lovely little note inside just explaining that, when things are packaged, sometimes things go missing, but always, give customer service a shout. The one thing I would say is for the price tag, it's actually quite well packaged and put together. There's a decent amount of paperwork. The airbrush itself comes with two different paint hoppers. One is, I believe, around about the 15mm mark, and one's around the standard 5 to 8mm mark. Overall, really nice construction as far as I can tell. Just simple aluminium frame. Nothing overly special about it. On the end, there's the safety stop, which you don't normally find at airbrushes this price. So it just means that when you put it in and engage it, the trigger can only go back so far. So it's quite a good tool for a beginner. Also, unlike a lot of entry-level airbrushes, there's the bayonet screw fitting already in place, so you don't have to buy an additional one. And I mean, a lot of the time, this can be like $5, $10 to get the extra piece. In situ is a airbrush trigger guard, essentially, to stop you getting the needle tip damaging anywhere. Inside the box, there's an additional 0.5mm needle. The needle actually already in the brush, I believe, is 0.35, and there's an additional nozzle head and fixtures and fittings. So always quite nice. Again, $45 US, and you're getting a full set of seals as well. Pretty rare that you get all of these things in this price tag. The other really cool thing I noticed was actually, if you look on the inside of the lid, it's got the full diagram of what's in the airbrush. Now, I didn't realise this until I started recording this video, and bearing in mind I've had the airbrush for however many weeks at this stage. But talking about nice little things that are included in the box, there's a full two-sided, well, it's a bit more than A5, instruction manual that'll take you through all the problems and pitfalls you might face when you're using the airbrush. So now we're going to go through and dismantle the full brush and have a look at all the constituent parts. So your standard bayonet fitting that comes off, the pressure fitting on the end again screws out nicely. There's a good bit of grease placed on it. I'll be interested to see in the long term how much paint actually backfires down there, but hopefully there isn't. The end comes off lovely, good seals, screw fitting to get the airbrush needle out, and I know some people are going to shout at me for pulling the needle out this way, but with this airbrush it's a lot easier to pull it out that way than the other way. As you can see, when I'm pulling the part off, there's quite a lot of constituent parts for this airbrush, and if you're not careful, you can lose them quite easily. As you're pulling the parts out, the back screws out, similar to most airbrushes, and this is where the spring fitting that holds the trigger in place. What you've just seen pop out there is the bane of my existence, and I'll explain why in a second. So yeah, spring fitting. This little monkey is an absolute nuisance. And again, I'll talk about it in a second, and it's probably my only negative point for this airbrush. So trigger comes out, paint hopper comes off nice and easy, and again, in the end, there's a couple of different fittings in the end. So there's a very, very small nozzle, as you'd normally find inside, and don't worry, I'm not using the sharp end of the needle here, I'm just using the back end of the needle to give it a little wiggle. Sometimes gets stuck, and I think it's just a brass needle head. Now, we've been using this airbrush for the best part of probably about 2 or 3 months now, so it is a little bit dirty in places, but it seems to have been holding up the test of time. I've dunked this in an ice profile bath multiple times to just clean out all the internals. Again, get frowned at, but for $45 US, I mean, I'm going to put it through its paces. When we're putting this all back together, again, the nozzle goes right in the end, and if you change them from a 0.35 to a 0.5, you are going to change these nozzle heads over. You need to get it really straight. If you don't get it straight when you're screwing back in, it can sometimes jam, and that's been a problem we've had 1 or 2 times with it. But on the most part, most of the issues don't actually come with a front end. The issues come with the next bit, which I'm going to show you now. So once you put the trigger in, there is the trigger return mechanism, is what I'm going to call it. But essentially, in most airbrushes, this is a spring. With the GHAD-39, it's a small piece of metal. Now, I'm going to speed the footage up in a second, but this little piece of metal is the bane of my existence. It adds easy a few minutes to putting your airbrush back together. Most of the higher end airbrushes normally have a spring rather than this metal piece. It does the same job, it just returns the trigger to the off position. Now, a lot of the time I end up having to use the back of the airbrush needle to try and push it into the right position to then secure it with a spring. I'm sure Gaahleri will look at this in the future. I mean, it's made the airbrush cheaper, but it is a nuisance. But talking about reviewing the actual airbrush itself, as long as you thin your paints properly, this is on par with most 0.4mm needles. I've managed to paint some really, really cool stuff, some really accurate fades. You don't get a particularly large amount of spotting or spider webbing as long as you've got your pressure right with it. It's a really good tool. And I mean, if you're going to have an entry-level airbrush, $45 US, it's not going to hurt. And I mean, the customer service from the Gaahleri team is actually really good. And I would say for the price tag, it's worth it. I mean, we've been using this for over 3 months now, and I've really, really put it through its paces. It's been in use every day, and it's yet to miss a step. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch the video. If you think about getting a Gaahleri airbrush, there's a link in our comments that will get us a little kickback if you fancy buying through those. The Gaahleri GHAD-39, the workhorse. Cheap and cheerful, but it'll do the job, and hopefully it'll stand the test of time. We'll keep using it and we'll find out. If you've liked this style of video, like and subscribe, and we'll put some more content out in the next couple of weeks. Cheers, guys.